in terms of a player of the game, for a game like this, it's tough because, Jalen Daniels may only play for one half. So,
your player of the game might wind up being like a second or third string running back. It might be.
I do think,
or, Harry Stewart or somebody like that. Yeah.
I do think Devin Neal, though, we're going to see something similar from him that we saw from him against Missouri State. If you remember, against Missouri State, he had like 9 carries for 100 yards, averaging like 11, 12 yards per carry. I think we'll see a similar style from him. I think he'll probably bust open a couple of big runs, maybe only have 8 to 10 to 12 carries, but over 100 yards, maybe a touchdown or two. So Devin Neal is my player of the game. Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible. Pay heed all who enter. Beware this podcast. That's right. This is Pay Heed Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer. Kevin Flaherty with me here. And folks, it's game week. Game time. Game week is here. A real live football game between Kansas and an opponent that is not also Kansas, but like a scrimmage or anything. It's happening this week, coming up on Thursday night at Children's Mercy Park for KU taking on Lindenwood. We're going to be talking about that. Also got a chance to hear from Lance Leipold and the coaches this week as well on Monday ahead of this matchup between Lindenwood and KU. We're going to talk about that a little bit as well. Also, we have our first depth chart of the season as well. Season with KU putting on a depth chart ahead of this game against Lindenwood. So we're going to be talking about all of that and more on today's episode. As always, we are brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. And of course, you can give us a like, give us a subscribe, leave us a comment, share your thoughts, how you're feeling heading into this game. You can also reach us on the Mint Mobile hotline at 913-407-6524 if you want to join in the conversation, give your score predictions, game predictions, season predictions. We had our season preview podcast last week, breaking down every game, how we think things will go. Send those over to the Mint Mobile hotline at 913-407-6524. Leave us a comment on YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, where we are growing rapidly on YouTube. We're going to have some exclusive video content there throughout the season as well, so be sure to keep an eye out over there. And also, for those that may be wondering, those longtime KCSN listeners on the KU side, the booth review will be returning this year as well. So be on the lookout on your feed for the booth review with Brandon McAnderson as well throughout the season here on KCSN. Okay, like I said, it's Kansas and Lindenwood. First game of the 2024 season coming up on Thursday night. Kevin, how scared are you of Lindenwood?
Just terrified, Nick. Absolutely terrified. Now, it's an interesting game because for those who are kind of unfamiliar with Lindenwood, this is a school that was an NAIA school up until 2010. I think was their last year as an NAIA school. Then they went to Division II, and they were Division II as recently as 2021. So this is just their third season as an FCS team. Lance Leipold kind of talked about it a little bit today in terms of the building process of now you're kind of building a program as they are to compete in FCS versus Division II. They weren't super successful last year, Nick. They had one conference win, wound up going 3-7. One of those wins was against a Division III team. And so this is a game that I think maybe the best description, and I think we mentioned this in a previous podcast, Brian Borland talked about how what he wanted to see in the opener was it's about us, right? It's about what Kansas does, how Kansas operates in its system, how Kansas executes. And I think that's the way you approach this. It's not necessarily, hey, you've got the fear of God in you that this is going to go the wrong way. But it is very much, hey, you've only got so many chances to go out and get better and get better in a live game situation if you want to reach Kansas's goals. And this is the first of those occasions. And so, again, not necessarily something where I would go into it terrified about the result, but I do think that it's something where Kansas is probably going to try to answer a few questions that it has and maybe even, come out and try and make a statement like, hey, this is the program that we are right now, and also continue to take those steps toward becoming potentially a Big 12 title contender.
Yeah, interestingly enough, one of those wins for Lindenwood last season was against Tennessee Tech, also, which I found to be a little bit interesting. But yeah, like you said, if you are someone who pays attention to lower division football, especially in the Northeast, Kansas, Missouri area, Lindenwood may be a bit more familiar to you because, like you said, up until 2010, they were in NAIA. So they were playing teams like Baker, like Central Methodist University, like Mid-American Nazarene, like Avila in the Heart of America Conference. In the NAI level. So if you are someone who pays more attention to that, some of those schools might sound familiar to you more in the local Northeast Kansas and Missouri area before they made the jump to Division II, obviously. And they had some success in Division II. I believe they went to the playoffs twice in Division II in 2019, and then I think in 2021 before they made the jump to FCS. So it's not like they have just, kind of full steam ahead regardless of the results. We're going to be jumping up. They have had some success when they've been making these moves. And now they're at the FCS level. So that is something to keep an eye on as well. But yeah, overall, I think you're absolutely right. This is a self-improvement game for KU. I don't want to be too disrespectful to Lindenwood, but I mean, the line opened at 44 points basically for KU, and I think it opened that way for a reason. I think I talked about this earlier in this offseason about my feeling going into the Tennessee Tech game was I want to see Kansas win by 35 points. I want to see Kansas win by 40 points. I want to see a team that wins by 35, 40 points. I didn't really feel that way about the Missouri State game, and I don't feel that way about this game against Lindenwood either, because I think Kansas has now proven themselves a little bit more since that Tennessee Tech game they had 2 years ago in 2022. So the scoreboard, I think, is significantly less important for a game like this than maybe I felt it has been previously with Kansas because of how bad KU's been in some cases. But that being said, yeah, this is an opportunity to get Jalen Daniels obviously out and get him a chance to showcase what he can do. And Lance Leipold spoke about that. I'm sure we'll dive into that more a little bit later on in the show. But yeah, a great opportunity for Kansas to get a lot of guys into the game and have a chance to really fine tune themselves because from here on out the schedule does get more difficult. Obviously, we've talked about how manageable, quote unquote, the schedule is, but there's a lot of games on the schedule that KU's going to have to fight for. This one is one where I feel pretty confident in that Kansas should and probably will easily win. But I am curious about the environment at University Park as well. Yeah. This is a game, obviously, the first time the KU is going to be playing there with fans. They only got to practice there once a couple weeks ago. So I don't know. I'm wondering if there will be any sort of jitters isn't the right term, but just unfamiliarity, I guess, with playing a game there. Now, obviously, Lindenwood will have to deal with that too, but that's different. They were going to be going on the road anyway, so it don't really matter where they're playing. But for KU, it should be a bit different, and I'm curious how they will respond to that also.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We had a chance to talk to a couple of players, yesterday, and they were coming off their practice at Arrowhead a day earlier, and one of the things that Lawrence Arnold mentioned was the field has a slope to it at Arrowhead. And so he was saying that he went up to make a play on the ball in the air and put his feet down for the ground. The ground wasn't there, where he was expecting it. And so little things like that, right? That maybe you or I don't really think about, or other people don't think about in those situations. There is an advantage to getting out on those fields and kind of seeing where things are a little bit different. Some stadiums have spots where the lights hit in certain areas, and so it's hard to see, with the lights, with where you're at it and all of those things. And so there might be a little bit of an adjustment period. I definitely, hear where you're coming from with that. I think too, with such an experienced roster and everything, you're not necessarily worried about the results. You're thinking about the process, right? In terms of, one of the best players, maybe the best player that Lindenwood has, is their wide receiver, Jeff Caldwell. He's a 6'5" wideout. If he gets Kobe a couple times, you're not necessarily going to come out of that being like, man, I am worried about Kobe, because you know that Kobe Bryant can play at a really high level in the Big 12. And so I think there's some of that, and that's not saying that they, should quote unquote pussyfoot around or whatever else. But I do think that there's something to be said for, a comfort level with a lot of guys. The thing that I want to see more than a scoreline, Nick, and I think I say this just about every time Kansas has an opener like this, I want to see Kansas's Lions come out and win the matchup and win it fairly significantly, right? I want to see this offensive line that Jeff Grimes, I don't say has been negative about, but has been kind of, glass half empty, maybe a little bit about, up until this point. I want to see the offensive line go out and look, like they can. And on the defensive side, I really like this tackle group. I think they're really deep. You know what you have with Jeremy Robinson as well. I'd like to see some pass rush. When you get Lindenwood into a 3rd and 8, are you getting home on the quarterback? Because it's not necessarily that if the answer is no, you're coming out of that game like, oh my gosh, the season's done. But it is something where you do want to see some positive indicators in that direction against the team that you're a lot more talented than.
Yeah, a couple of other notes on Lindenwood. You mentioned Caldwell, their star receiver, probably their best player, like you said. They've got a transfer quarterback from McNeese that was at the FBS level actually in 2022 with Iowa State. Coincidentally enough, they've also got another returning quarterback. Also, they also returned 4 offensive linemen on their own line.
Yep.
And if you are a Phil Steele reader, Phil Steele put 2 of those offensive linemen from this team on his first team, Big South, which is the conference that they're in. It's like the Big South plus Ohio and LA. They combined them at the FCS level. I think it's because of part of the reason why you're seeing teams jump out of the FCS to the FBS, like Missouri State types and so on and so forth. So they merged them. But Phil Steele put 2 offensive linemen from this group from Lindenwood on his all Big South Ohio Valley team. On defense, Jeff Grimes talked about how they're a pretty fundamentally sound defense from what he's seen on film. Not really much else jumped out to me when seeing them. I think you maybe felt the same, Kevin, that this is a defense that probably is going to have a very hard time stopping Devin Neal. And furthermore, is going to have a hard time containing these receivers as well for KU. So kind of expecting a big game from the offense in this one for Kansas. But this Lindenwood offense, I am intrigued by just because, and Brian Roller talked about this, is that first game of the season, I think probably favors the offense. I mean, I don't know, maybe not because execution, I guess. But as an opposing offense coming in, they have a whole offseason to work on new stuff that's not on tape, so on and so forth, that could throw a wrinkle at the defense. So I'm curious about the Lindenwood offense against the Kansas defense in this one.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting too because Lindenwood has so much continuity on that coaching staff, and so it's not. It's these guys have been there a really long time, 8 years apiece. And so when you look at the head coach, the 2 coordinators and everything being on that staff for that long, you feel like you probably have a pretty good idea what they want to do. But that's not to say that they haven't dusted off 3 or 4 things that they feel can work specifically against what Kansas likes to do. Offensively, they're going to be a single back group that's going to come out typically in 3 wide, 4 wide. They'll slide a tight end in or out. Defensively, they're mostly a 4-man front, although if you do put multiple tight ends out there, they will walk kind of a stand-up guy up there as well. Interesting guy to kind of take a look at with this group is Ethan Stolzatz, the linebacker, who was a second-team all-conference guy for Lindenwood. He's a guy from Capon in Wichita. Was a guy that went to Jay Sharp's combine and did really, really well. Kind of tested off the charts for how tall and long he is. He's listed 6'5", 220 now. He's a guy that's going to have to probably make a lot of plays on KU's running backs when you look at what both teams want to do, and it's going to be a tough matchup for them. Couple other guys with local ties, obviously, Cole Watson from Lawrence being a guy that stands out. But another one that I find really interesting, their starting running back is likely to be Robert Giamno. He's been there for a while, but they did get a transfer in from a kid named Cole Mueller. And for those of you who want a little bit of a deep cut, Cole Mueller was the final guy committed to David Beatty when he was let go. Remained committed under Les Miles for like a week or 2, reopened right before National Signing Day. He's now in that running back rotation as well. And so, it should be a game that, like you said, Lindenwood has a few guys here or there. I think it's going to take a little while for them to build sort of that roster depth that they need to compete in that conference at the FCS level. And so, for Kansas, this really is about, hey, come out and execute what you do, do your job and do it at a high level. Because while this game, may seem like a game that that Kansas, should pull away in and get a lot of people to play. Illinois is coming up real fast. And after that, UNLV, who looks really, really good, and then conference play. And so this may be a quote-unquote soft opening like, restaurants have or whatever else. But I guarantee you there's nothing soft about the way this coaching staff is approaching this game, or the way the team is approaching this game in terms of needing to come out and really execute and play well.
Yep, and we heard from Lance Leipold along with Brian Borland and Jeff Grimes. Also got KU's first official depth chart of the season. We're going to get to all of that and more coming up on the other side. First, we have to tell you about our sponsors, our Home Field Apparel. Look, folks, time is running out. You better get to homefieldapparel.com right now. Get your exclusive KU football box. Only 55 other schools in the country got them. KU is one of them. It'll get you covered for the entire football season. Short sleeve, long sleeve, hoodie weather when it gets cold. Listen, I have been to some games at Arrowhead in December. If you're in the upper deck, you're going to need something to keep you warm.
That hoodie's amazing, too.
Yes. Be sure to check it out, the hoodie. By the way, those items in the football box are exclusive to the box. So you can't get those items anywhere else. You have to get the box in order to get those. They'll have you covered for the whole season. Also, check out all the other items that Home Field has for KU over at homefieldapparel.com. We got you covered with 15% off your first order right here using the code PAYHEED24, PAYHEED24 for 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com. We're back in just a moment.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
When you discover a new binge-worthy show or a song that you bump on repeat and you have to share it with your friends so they can experience just how awesome it is? That's kind of what it feels like when you discover Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan. That's such an awesome deal. There's no way you can keep it to yourself. Friends don't let friends overpay for wireless. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plan and switch to Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you and your squad with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/payheed. That's mintmobile.com/payheed. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/payheed. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
This is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. Along with Kevin Flaherty, I'm Nick Springer. Look, we got you covered with Home Field. We're trying to save you some money. You can also make some money as well by taking the Blue Wire Pods survey. You can make an extra $500 by going to bluewirepods.com/survey and completing the Blue Wire audience survey about you and your podcast listening habits for a chance to win a $500 gift card. The survey will help create a better advertising experience for audiences like you, and in turn, help our show here on Pay. So go to bluewirepods.com/survey, where all you have to do is answer a few simple questions for a chance to win $500. Make sure to read full terms and disclaimer, plus complete the survey for a chance to win. That's bluewirepods.com/survey, and the link to that is also in the show notes of this episode. Okay, so we got a chance here from Lance Leipold here for game week for KU taking on Lindenwood. Also got a chance to look at the depth chart. Let's start with the depth chart, Kevin. Why not?
Yeah.
KU puts out the depth chart for 2 deep on Monday afternoon ahead of this game against Lindenwood. Let's just start here. What stood out to you? What were some surprises maybe? I guess we'll start maybe with the offensive line. Bryce Foster gets the starting nod over Shane Bumgardner. Bryce Kilder at left tackle, Logan Brown at right tackle, Michael Ford at guard as well. What else? Anything else that really stood out to you about the depth chart release?
No orbs, right? Which is incredibly rare for this time of year. For those of you unfamiliar, an or is usually meant to signify that two guys are roughly the same place on the depth chart, and so it's listed as this guy or that guy. Nebraska actually came out with their depth chart, Nick. All 4 running backs on the depth chart had an or next to them. So it's
and listen, for people that are longtime KU fans, they are very familiar with the or. And many preseason depth charts that have had numerous ors on them. So that is, it is not insignificant that this one does not have that on there for anybody at all.
Yeah, and I think, it was really clean, 22 players on offense, 22 players on defense. There wasn't, a lot of shuffling around to make this guy look like a starter when maybe he isn't or whatever else. But, the interesting thing is, with so much experience on this roster, Nick, you're talking about 20 seniors and 19 juniors out of the 44 players on that depth chart. You didn't know how many of the young guys you were going to see. And so one of the things that stood out to me, DJ Warner, obviously getting on the 2 deep at defensive end. I would expect Dak Brinkley and By Job to also play, but they weren't on the 2 deep the way that it was listed. And Jalen Todd, making it there. They've got a really good group, I think, of young cornerbacks in that group. And so for Jalen Todd to be number 2, at one of those cornerback positions, it's not a small feat. There was a lot of competition, I think, for that spot. And I think you brought it up well with the offensive line, too. Not just the battle at center, but is it absolutely going to be Bryce Cable doing left tackle, Logan Brown right tackle? We got an answer to that as well. And so I think this offensive line really has a chance to be pretty good. It's not necessarily that they're there right now, and I think Jeff Grimes and probably Ag Paulson would both tell you that they aren't there right now. But when you look at the individual pieces and as they continue to develop chemistry, when you look at the depth and guys that they can bring in and rotate through to keep some guys fresh, this has a chance to be a pretty good offensive line and really allow Kansas to kind of make its hay with the running game in a way that they haven't always been able to. Yes, they've been able to run the ball, Nick, but we've talked about it. A lot of that was scheme, right? A lot of that was, hey, we're going to run the option in a way where you have one guy having to make a decision between these 2 guys. We're going to get you looking left and then go right. With the guys that they have on this offensive line and the work that they've done with Matt Gildersleeve and everything else, Nick, I think there's a chance that Kansas could look across the line, at 3rd and 1 against some opponents and just say, you know what you're going to do. We know what we're going to do, and we're going to run it anyway. And so I think that this line has a chance to be physical, maybe in a way that the previous lines haven't quite been up to that standard. But they're going to need to come together a little bit.
Yeah, and look, when Bryce Foster committed to Kansas out of the transfer portal earlier in the summer, I think the general reaction was, okay, there you go. Shane Baumgartner maybe didn't have the best spring, didn't get acclimated quite 100% the way he maybe hoped. And here comes Bryce Foster, who is at 6'5", 330 pounds. His neck circumference is about 50 inches. It doesn't even make sense. He's got a tree trunk around it, keeping his head on his shoulders. It's insane. And they're starting center, right? And then you kind of get this back and forth over the course of fall camp of, hey, Bryce Foster's got to earn it. And Jim Baumgartner, improved it sounded like over the summer quite a bit. So that became more of a battle, but ultimately Bryce Foster does become a starter. One thing Lance Leipold did mention, though, is he brought it up again, this idea of Bryce Foster moving to guard and coming in at center. Like, I don't really know what to think of that. I'm having a hard time really buying into that being something that will, legitimately happen on a regular basis or, at all maybe. But it was floated by Lance Leipold. It was floated by him again on Monday. So I don't know. I guess maybe that's something. I don't think that ever would really happen, but I guess maybe it's a possibility. But that's something that was noteworthy. Obviously, like you mentioned with the tackles as well, with Bryce Cable moving left tackle through fall camp. It sounded like Jeff Grimes was a bit more positive about that on Monday than he had been earlier in fall camp. So that should be a good sign, I think, overall. And then on the defensive side, you mentioned it with DJ Warner. One thing about that is I would assume that by Job, the reason he didn't make it on there was because he dealt with an injury. He had a giant club on his right wrist, I believe, from a wrist injury he had. So, without that, maybe he steps in and ends up being the guy that's there. But I think to your point, even though those guys are on there, Dak Brinkley or by Job, they're both going to be playing. They're both going to be probably having an impact. And then one other point I really wanted to drive home that you had touched on is 44 players across the board on offense and defense, 22 on both sides. 39 are juniors and seniors. There are 5 underclassmen on this depth chart for KU. Really only 4 because one of them is a redshirt sophomore in Jacob Caldwell. So you're talking 4 underclassmen essentially on this depth chart for KU heading into the season, which I think is massive, right? And I think that really underscores this idea that this is the year for KU. Like, this is their chance. This is their year. With the amount of experience they have, with the amount of talent they have, guys like Jalen Daniels, like Devin Neal, their receivers, you look at the defensive side of the ball, Tommy Dunn and DJ Withers, Jeremy Robinson, Cornell Wheeler, Marvin Grant, the 2 corners, Melo Dotson, Kobe Bryant. This is KU's year to really try to plant their flag and try to make a statement and make a run. Like, you have the expanded college football playoff. So that's entirely on the table now for KU to make it. And yeah, I mean, that was really eye-popping to me as I was counting through and going, wait a minute. 39 out of 44 players on there are upperclassmen. It's insane to think about. And I think, again, I don't know how much this is talked about inside that locker room with KU. I assume probably not that much, but this is it. This is the year for Kansas. I don't think there's any question about that heading into this season. And then one other note that I think we should mention here with the depth chart is place kicker. Right, there was a kicking battle happening for KU over the course of this fall camp between who we thought it would be Old Beaver Curtis and Charlie Weinrich, the 2 place kickers. But Tabor Allen was actually listed as a starting kicker for KU. Lance Leipold spoke about him a little bit, said that he's a bit more of a quiet guy, but came in and just kept doing well. And so they decided to switch him to starter. I guess it makes sense. The guy comes in and he's just like, wait a minute, he keeps doing well. Okay, well, let's make him the starter. For those that don't know, Tabor Allen, of course, has been the kickoff specialist for KU for a couple of years now, exclusively on kickoffs. Well, now he'll be handling place kicking duties as well for KU coming into the season. That is an area that I am going to have a magnifying glass on for the various reasons we've talked about in the past, which is, hey, special teams could be the difference between going 10-2 and 9-3. And that could be the difference between going to Arlington and not going to Arlington, going to the playoff and not going to the playoff. So I will be keeping a close eye on that as well also. Anything else from the depth chart that really stood out to you that you feel is we should make mention? Oh, one other thing.
Yep.
Jalen Daniels is the starting quarterback.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yes. One other thing. To get that out. Just to clear the air on that. Just clear the air. One final thought.
It was good to see guys that were getting talked up about get their spots on the depth chart, right? Because there's nothing worse than hearing everybody talk about like Dean Miller and like him, not being the guy or whatever. Him getting that start opposite Jeremy Robinson, I think is such a good indicator for them, and that they tried to address that spot with By Job, and that's not a knock on By Job at all. I think they thought Dylan Brooks was a guy that was going to compete there. He had the injury in the spring. And so you look at all those things, and so to have somebody on your roster step up the way that Dean Miller was able to do is certainly a positive there. Cornell Wheeler was a guy that I think we all thought was going to start. He's a captain. I think that was another indicator. It wasn't necessarily something on the depth chart per se, but one of the things that they've talked about kind of all along is that replacing Rich Miller, the player, was going to be a little bit difficult. But I think that they really thought, hey, where we're going to need somebody to step up is from a leadership standpoint and from an alignment standpoint. And I don't mean like alignment, like making sure like everybody's on the same page, but like making sure guys are lined up correctly and knowing what they're doing. That was something that Rich Miller did really well. And so for Cornell Wheeler to land a captain spot, I think is another really positive sort of indicator that things went well there as well. And so I really like this cornerback group. I think they've got a lot of depth at safety. The offensive line is going to be worth watching against Lindenwood to see how everything comes together. And like I said earlier, the other thing that I would think I'm really going to watch is that pass rush. Are they getting home? Are they creating pressure? And you talked about the 2 quarterbacks that Lindenwood will we'll roll with. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw both of them. Carter Davis being the returning guy, and then Nate Glantz, being the transfer in from McNeese. Both of those guys can really move, Nick. I think Glantz is more a scramble to throw guy, where you have to kind of hold up in coverage when he's out there running around, because he does keep his eyes downfield pretty well. And Carter Davis is really elusive. He's not a straight line guy. He's a fairly fluid athlete. And so if he gets outside of the pocket, he's going to try and make a guy miss it and get upfield. And so I think watching the pass rush against a pair of quarterbacks that can really move like that, watching the pass rush against an offensive line that, even though they're FCS, they do return 4 starting offensive linemen, like you said, potentially 2 all-conference type linemen. I think all of that's going to be something to really watch as well.
Yeah, and look, just to be clear, I think when you look at the depth chart for this team going into this game against Lindenwood, I would think that most of, if not all of the 44 guys that are listed on the depth chart are probably going to get a chance to play coming into this game against Lindenwood, right? I mean, if you expect Kansas to do what we think they should be able to do in this game, you're going to get a chance to see probably Cole Ballard, maybe even Isaiah Marshall at some point in this game, right? Remember, with the new rule, you can play a guy in 4 games and still redshirt. So that's huge for players like Isaiah Marshall, for players like Dak Brinkley, like DJ Warner, like a Jalen Todd, who have an opportunity as true freshmen to get live game experience and still maintain a redshirt eligibility. So I would expect that this would be one of those games where you would see a lot of those guys get to play, certainly, to get that experience. But yeah, so I think you'll have a chance to see a lot of those players get out there and have a chance to showcase what they can do on both sides of the ball, which is really exciting, because I think one of the things about this team that really sticks out to me now versus 2021, basically what that took over, is you do have that depth, right? Pretty much across the board, you feel fairly good about a lot of this quote unquote second team guys that are listed for this team for KU. And so having that type of experience, having those type of players, obviously if you have 39 upperclassmen on a 22-man roster, basically 11 on both sides, you're going to have a lot of backups that are upperclassmen, which is also significant. So this should be a fun game and a chance to maybe see a lot of those guys get in the game as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think this is going to be such an interesting game for a lot of reasons. One, I think we brought this up multiple episodes, but remember, at this point last year, Austin Booker wasn't a starter. He wasn't listed on the depth chart. He won that starting job and became an all-conference guy on the field. And so you're going to get a chance, to see some of these guys either entrench themselves or, potentially take a starting spot from somebody once the games start. And to your point, with all of that experience, with all of the guys there, you've got guys who are backing up that have starting college experience, especially on that offensive line. If you're not making your blocks, if you're not doing the things that you're supposed to do, they have options. And so I think it's going to be really fascinating to kind of watch all of this play out, both against Lindenwood. And to the other thing, I don't know if they'll show their whole hand. I mean, Lance Leipold said today when I asked him, they're not going to hold anything back. But I do wonder a little bit with some of the guys on this team. They've talked about having varying skill sets and things like that, having versatility. Grimes today talked about the tight end position, having 3 guys that he really likes, and Jared Casey, Trevor Cardell, and Leighton Pure. All 3 of those guys are really different. And so I think one of the things that's sort of not a headline event necessarily, but that I want to see is, are these guys getting opportunities in different situations based on their skill sets? And so if Kansas gets Lindenwood at 3rd and 9, is it just whichever defensive end's out there or, whoever's turn it is? Or is it the sort of thing where, hey, it's the second quarter, it's 3rd and 9, like let's send Dak Brinkley out there to try and rush the passer a little bit? I'm interested to see how the formation subs and things like that work out as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned it with Lance Leipold. That was one thing I've got to bring up as well, is Lance Leipold kind of said, like, hold anything back. Are you crazy? Like, we're going to show everything, we're going to do everything. So if you have any doubts about how serious Lance Leipold is maybe taking this game, I think he's taking it very seriously.
Sure.
And I think KU is prepared to kind of unload the chamber, so to speak, with what they have. And listen, it makes sense. I mean, Jeff Grimes this will be his first game, calling for KU. So, why try to hold anything back? Why not see what you have and see what works and see what doesn't in this first game against Lindenwood? So that was kind of the impression I got from Lance Leipold. A couple of the notes that I thought from Lance Leipold were interesting was he was kind of talking about the process of building this program up a little bit. And he mentioned that in 2021, he said that in the eye test, they might have gone 0-12. They got 2 wins, which I think kind of speaks to the strength and conditioning program that KU has in place in order to build up their players. Friend of the show, Brian Haney, always would say, with the eye test, like the sort of the getting off the bus test.
Yep.
When you get off the bus, they look like a team that's going to go, and play some football. They have football players off it. So that was something that I found interesting from Lance Leipold. And I think that probably speaks to the awareness that Lance Leipold has of just maybe how far things have come in just a few years, right? Like to recognize, look, we probably didn't even win the eye test when we first got here. And now all of a sudden we're in a position where we're talking about making a push for the Big 12 title and making a push for the college football playoff. So that stood out to me. I mentioned the whole Bryce Foster playing guard thing again from Lance Leipold. I don't know what to do about that. I don't know that I really believe it at all. But he keeps saying, so I guess, whatever. And then another thing, and you touched on this as well with Lindenwood, and this is something that's really kind of cool, is that we've talked a lot about Lance Leipold and staff continuity that he has, right? Yep. Going back to Wisconsin Whitewater, going back to Buffalo, bringing guys like Brian Boyle with him, bringing guys, various different staff members with him over the course of his career and really having that staff continuity. You mentioned it. Lindenwood is very similar. And Lance Leipold kind of took some time to speak about that and say, hey, Lindenwood, same deal. They have a similar coaching staff in the sense that they have guys that have been together for a long time. He mentioned how, hey, we've gone to some Lindenwood camps and we've seen that they run a camp about as well as anybody in the country. So he had a lot of high praise for that and that staff continuity as well, which I thought was really cool and really interesting to see, and some of that appreciation for other programs that maybe are building kind of the same way, I think, maybe as Lance Leipold would want, I guess. And then one other thing that I found interesting from Jeff Grimes was he had mentioned, he kind of just threw this in at the end of I don't even think it was a question related to this, but he just kind of threw it in there that Logan Brown, he thought, was the most improved player, maybe on the whole team over the course of fall camp, which is great to hear, right? Because that's a guy that obviously has incredible talent. You look at him, he's, all of 6'7", 6'8", over 300 pounds. So if he's most improved, a guy that was already a 5-star player and already a highly rated transfer from Wisconsin, going to right tackle, that's got to be music to your ears if you have any worries about the offensive line protecting Jalen Daniels this season.
Yeah, protecting Jalen Daniels, and the best way to protect Jalen Daniels is to run the ball, right? Like
that too, yeah.
Is to make sure that he's not even being put into a position to get hit. And I think when I was talking about the physicality along the offensive line, that was something that I was kind of referencing a little bit, is look at Kobe Baines at guard, is a really physical guy. And you look at Logan Brown at right tackle is a really physical guy. And Bryce Foster at center is incredibly powerful. And so you've got some guys that, it's not that they need to, you still got to get your fundamentals right. I'm not saying that, but it's not like they need to surprise somebody with an angle block to move them. Like, these are guys that can take somebody and deposit them out of the way of the running back. And that's something that Kansas hasn't necessarily had a ton of. And so that's something I'm interested to see play out on the football field for sure. Going back real quick to the not holding anything back thing, I covered a coach when I was in Texas who was an offensive coordinator that was really big into running like 3 trick plays in the opener, when they play against Rice or somebody like that. And like, you laugh about it, but like when he talked about it afterwards, he goes, people are so focused on staying vanilla. He goes, we run these 3 trick plays and everybody that we play for the next few weeks has to practice for those. Like, hey, they've got this in their playbook. They run this, don't get caught on this thing. And so he felt like it was actually a better investment to run the trick play in a game like that, because then your opponent has to focus on how to stop that play. and not the stuff that's really your bread and butter that you want to run. They don't get a chance to spend as much time on, say, wide zone or, the way that you're going to run certain other concepts. And so I was just saying that to say there are different schools of thought. And Kansas has been in a spot in the past where they've been pretty vanilla in the opener. I don't, think that that's a controversy to say that. 2 years ago, going from what they did to all of a sudden, popping out of the closet with a machete against West Virginia, in terms of an offensive game plan, they absolutely did that. But at the same time, there are some people out there who believe that going vanilla is not the right way, that, if anything, you should go out and run some things that are maybe counter to what you're going to be doing, because then you're forcing your next opponents to have to prepare for something that you may or may not run again. And if you do run something like that again, maybe you run a counter to it, right? Like maybe you put in a reverse against Lindenwood, and then you have a reverse pass that you can run against Illinois that takes advantage of over pursuit or playing things a certain way. And so there are some coaches out there that believe that the way to address the opener is not to be as vanilla and hide as many things as possible. It's to come out and show everything, and then you basically have to worry about you doing all these different things.
Okay, Kansas takes on Lindenwood Thursday night. Kevin, game prediction. Let's do game prediction, player of the game, and what's that? Stick with that. Game prediction and player of the game.
Can we do like a Mr. T thing up there that just says pain, like from Rockies? No, I think this is a game that Kansas should take care of business. And I think Kansas is probably going to do it early and often. You've seen the players, Nick. I think they're pretty raring and ready to go. And you hear every single camp from every team at every level possible. I think you hear Pee-wee teams where their coach is like, well, our players are just tired of hitting each other and they're ready to hit somebody. I still think that's true. And so I do think Kansas is going to come out really well, but especially when you start to see that roster depth start to show up and whatever else. I think Kansas pulls away in this one, and it winds up not being a close game. What was the line? Was it 42?
I believe it opened at 43.5.
I would probably go myself. I would probably go with the over. I get it's week one. I get that weird things can happen in week one. You can come out and just kind of, boot the ball around and not be at your most polished. But I still think that Kansas is probably pretty good value for that over.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can find what the line is currently as we record this on Monday afternoon. Bear with me here. It's 44.5 currently. So okay. 44.5 right now for KU against Lindenwood. I'm kind of with you. You think back to that Missouri State game. Remember, Kansas started kind of slow, right? Missouri State had the lead early in that game before KU really started to get their footing and sort of establish themselves. I'm kind of with you, though. I get the sense that won't be the case for this game. I think KU will come out early and probably look pretty impressive right off the bat, especially with Jaylen Daniels, right? I mean, this dude's got, a year's worth of pent-up, energy that he wants to get out for playing, right? I mean, Lance Leipold spent a lot of time talking about seeing Jaylen Daniels and just seeing sort of that joy back with him, knowing that he's going to be able to go out there week in and week out and play for KU. So love to hear that. Love to hear that. And I think that's one of the reasons why KU will not start slow at this one. Yeah, I'll take KU minus the 44.5. Why not? I mean, yeah, dude, why not? Come on. Yeah, I think KU will win this game. Probably maybe 56-10 or something like that. Maybe even more. I'm not sure. That's kind of my prediction. In terms of a player of the game, for a game like this, it's tough because, Jaylen Daniels may only play for one half. So,
your player of the game might wind up being like a second or third string running back. It might be.
I do think,
or, Harry Stewart or somebody like that. Yeah.
I do think Devin Neal, though, we're going to see something similar from him that we saw from him against Missouri State. If you remember, against Missouri State, he had 9 carries for 100 yards, averaging 11, 12 yards per carry. I think we'll see a similar style from him. I think he'll probably bust open a couple of big runs, maybe only have 8 to 10 to 12 carries, but over 100 yards, maybe a touchdown or two. So Devin Neal is my player of the game for this one.
That's probably one that I was going to pick as well, because I think not only will he likely do that, you might even see him catch a pass or two out of the backfield when you look at the way that Grimes likes to use his running backs in that fashion, whether that's a screen pass, whether that's something a little bit down the field. It would not surprise me at all to see Devin not have a whole bunch of touches, but hit 120, 150 total yards. And so I would probably pick Devin Neal as well. But since you did, I'm going to go a different direction. I think, and this is going to be out there, I think I'm going to go with Marvin Grant, because I think when you look at what they think of Marvin Grant, I think they really feel like they've got a guy who's a potential all-conference guy at that safety spot, but he's going to play safety. He's going to play Cinco, which for those of you who are unfamiliar is kind of like their nickel safety. It's almost like an extra linebacker. Craig Young played both linebacker and the Cinco last year. So if you would be understood for thinking they were the same thing, because Craig Young was very freaky in that way. But it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Marvin Grant finish with, some big tackles, maybe a tackle for loss or two, and maybe even pick off a pass, And so I think Marvin Grant is my guy. Don't be surprised either, Nick. We've heard a lot of buzz lately about O.J. Burrows, and it would not surprise me at all if O.J. started off his season with a pick or two as well.
Yeah, O.J. Burrows, it's so funny because Brian Broland has talked about him as like a really more quiet, reserved type of player off the field, but he plays a position that has to be very vocal with communication, and Brian Broland feels like O.J. Burrows has maybe taken that next step in his evolution of being a communicator at that position and being able to demonstrate his abilities, right? We've known he's a really great cover safety and so on and so forth. So he's definitely a guy that, I think probably gets overlooked the most, right? Because, Kobe Bryant and Melo Dotson are the headliners with being first team all conference players. Marvin Grant obviously gets a lot of conversation because of the reasons that you outlined. But O.J. Burrows might be a guy to keep an eye on. So, but yeah, I think I'm excited to watch this game for sure. Children's Mercy Park should be a lot of fun. I'm expecting it to be loud, but with the way it is, if you've ever been to a soccer game there with Sporting, with the way it's kind of been closed, even though it's going to be significantly less amount of people, I think it still should be a great atmosphere, and I'm excited to see KU fans fill that place up Thursday night for KU and Lindenwood to kick off the 2024 season. As always, if you liked what you heard, like what you were watching on YouTube, be sure to leave us a like, subscribe, give us a comment, share your thoughts, give us a score prediction in the comments if you think. You can also hit us up on the Mint Mobile KCSN hotline, 913-407-6524, to give your thoughts, game predictions, players of the game, so on and so forth. You can really leave any question, comment, and we may answer it here on the show. So be sure to head over and do that. And be sure to leave us a 5-star rating and review. And again, subscribe, like on YouTube, share your comments there. Also, it helps grow the channel here, as we are very excited to be covering KU throughout the course of this season. We are going to be doing throughout the season some live post-game shows also on YouTube. So you definitely want to be subscribed to our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN when we are doing those throughout the season also as well. So we'll be back later this week to recap this game on Thursday. On Thursday night, we'll probably have something on Friday for a recap of KU and Lindenwood. Until then, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you again soon.